In 1617, a man named Shahzadeh Ba married an Ottoman princess. 3 days later, palace guards dragged him into the courtyard and beheaded him. His crime? The princess reported he had shown insufficient reverence during their wedding night. But that's not even the worst part. What I'm about to reveal will shatter everything you thought you knew about royal marriages, because while European princesses married for political alliances, Ottoman princesses entered unions that were barely disguised death sentences, not for them, but for their husbands. Here's what you'll uncover in the next 10 minutes. First, the imperial law so cruel that Ottoman princesses literally preferred death over marriage. Second, the morning after ritual that destroyed powerful men overnight. And third, how one princess turned her wedding night into a weapon that killed over 20,000 soldiers and nearly brought down an empire. If you think you're ready for history's darkest royal secret, hit subscribe, because what happened inside the Ottoman harem makes Game of Thrones look like a children's story. And every word you're about to hear comes from real historical documents. This gets dark, you've been warned. Picture this. It's the early 1600s. The Ottoman Empire spans 3 continents, rules over 30 million people, and commands armies that make Europe tremble. Inside the Topkapi Palace in Istanbul, imperial princesses live among silks, gold, and diamonds, daughters of sultans, treated as near divine. From the outside, they seem to live the ultimate fairy tale. But the truth? These women were prisoners in golden cages, and their wedding nights weren't celebrations. They were the beginning of carefully orchestrated nightmares. Unlike European royals, who married nobles for alliances or heirs, Ottoman princesses faced a reality that was far more sinister. Their marriages were political traps, bound by laws so twisted that both bride and groom entered knowing one of them might not survive. The Ottoman dynasty had a problem. Princesses were considered sacred, the daughters of the shadow of God on earth. They couldn't marry foreign princes. That risked Ottoman blood falling under foreign power. And they couldn't marry other royals. Even the empire had limits. So instead, they married Ottoman nobles and military officials. But here's what made it a death trap. The law that protected the princess's honor was written so severely that it guaranteed her husband would live in constant fear. And that fear began the moment their wedding night started. Before I reveal that law, understand this. What I'm about to tell you is not legend. It's confirmed by Venetian spies, French envoys, and Ottoman court chroniclers. The evidence is overwhelming and horrifying. So what was this law that made grown men cry when they learned they'd been chosen to marry a princess? Here it is. Ottoman imperial law forbade any man married to a royal princess from taking concubines, marrying again, or having any sexual relationship with anyone but his royal wife. The punishment? Immediate execution. No trial, no appeal. Your head displayed on a palace spike before sunset. Now that might sound like ordinary monogamy to you, but in the Ottoman world, polygamy was the norm. Every nobleman could have 4 wives and countless concubines. But marry a princess, you just became the only man in the empire legally chained to one woman. And it gets worse. That same law also forbade the husband from ever divorcing the princess under any circumstances. Even if she wanted to leave, he couldn't initiate it. He was bound to her until death. So you're thinking, okay, forced monogamy, eternal marriage, bad, but not fatal, right? Wrong, because the imperial family added one more exquisite twist. The husband was expected to satisfy his royal wife, show perfect reverence, produce heirs on command, and never show the slightest hint of disrespect. And who decided what counted as disrespect? The princess, the sultan, the sultan's mother, the harem administrators, basically everyone except the husband. Imagine you're that man. A high-ranking vizier, a decorated commander. You've just been honored with marriage to a 15-year-old princess you've never met. On your wedding night, every move you make is being judged. Too aggressive, executed for assault. Too passive, executed for inadequacy. A whisper of rumor that you displeased her. executed for disrespect. That's exactly what happened to Shahzad Bayezid in 1617. Married on a Monday, beheaded by Thursday. The official record said he showed insufficient reverence. We'll never know what that actually meant. Wrong tone of voice. Failure to please her? She simply disliked him? It didn't matter. He was dead, and no one questioned it. Ottoman court archives list over 30 cases of princesses' husbands executed within their first year of marriage between 1550 and 1700. 30 men whose only crime was marrying into the royal bloodline, but the wedding night itself held an even darker ritual, one that decided whether the husband would live to see another sunrise. And that's where this story turns truly unthinkable. The sun rises the morning after the royal wedding. You're the groom, a high-ranking Ottoman official who somehow survived the night. You think the worst is behind you. You're wrong. The door creaks open. Senior harem matrons file into the chamber, the Sultan's mother's most trusted women. They aren't here to congratulate you. They're here to inspect you. First comes the bedding. They check the sheets for signs of consummation, a standard ritual in many royal courts. But in the Ottoman palace, that's only test 1, test 2. They question the princess in private. Did he fulfill his duties? Did he show proper reverence? Was she satisfied? And remember, anything short of enthusiastic approval means you're a dead man walking. But test 3 is what no one dares to talk about. In 1675, a French ambassador named Antoine Galland lived in Istanbul. His private diaries, published long after his death, describe a secret ritual so humiliating that even hardened diplomats doubted it could be real. According to Galland's palace informants, the husband was summoned before the Sultan's mother, the Jevahir Sultan, the most powerful woman in the empire. There, in a ceremony meant to strip him of all pride, the husband was forced to prostrate himself completely naked before her while she interrogated him about his wedding night. You read that right. The Sultan's mother would question a grown man, often a vizier or decorated general, about his sexual performance while he knelt bare and trembling at her feet. She asked explicit questions, expected detailed answers, judged his tone, his shame, his reverence. This wasn't about confirming consummation. This was psychological domination, a performance designed to remind him that his life existed entirely at the mercy of the imperial family. One wrong answer, one hint of pride or hesitation, and the guards standing behind him would drag him straight to the execution chamber. Think about the cruelty of that system. A man who once commanded armies, who ruled provinces, who held the power of life and death over thousands, reduced to begging for mercy before an elderly woman who could end his life with a gesture. Between 1650 and 1680, Ottoman records from the Grand Vizier's office document 12 husbands of imperial princesses executed within 30 days of their weddings. 12 men who had survived the wedding night, but failed the impossible morning inspection. The official reasons: disrespect to imperial dignity, failure to maintain reverence, inadequate devotion to the sacred bloodline. In plain language, they failed to grovel convincingly enough. But here's where the story takes a darker and more cunning turn. Some princesses hated these marriages just as much as their doomed husbands feared them. They didn't want strange men in their beds, and the court gave them no escape, except one, and what a few of them did to free themselves makes the executions look merciful. Her name was Jevahir Sultan. The year 1622. Her wedding night conversation with her new husband, Grand Vizier Kara Davud Pasha, went something like this: "You have two choices. Serve me completely and obey every command, and live in wealth and power. Or refuse, and I will tell my brother the Sultan that you assaulted me tonight. You'll be strangled with a bowstring before sunrise. Choose. This isn't rumor. We know it happened because of what came next." Jevahir Sultan was the daughter of Sultan Ahmed IV and sister to Sultan Osman II. Highly educated, politically brilliant and absolutely furious about being forced into marriage. So she decided to turn the entire system against itself. Within weeks of her wedding, her husband, Kara Davud Pasha, began making bizarre political decisions. He blocked military campaigns he had personally approved. He diverted critical resources. He sabotaged communication between the Sultan and his commanders. Why? Because Jevahir Sultan was using the threat of execution to control him completely. At that time, the Sultan was preparing for a massive campaign against Poland-Lithuania, the Ottoman-Polish War of 1620-1621. The empire had momentum and strategic advantage. But the campaign required perfect coordination, supplies, intelligence, discipline. And Jevahir ordered her husband to sabotage it all. We don't know her motive. Maybe she wanted to weaken political rivals. Maybe she was bribed by foreign agents. Maybe she simply wanted to prove she had more power than her brother, the Sultan himself. Whatever the reason, Kara Davud Pasha obeyed. He delayed supply shipments, sent contradictory orders, delivered false reports about enemy troop movements. The result was catastrophic. The Battle of Saqqara in September 1620, a campaign that should have been an easy Ottoman victory, became a disaster. The follow-up expedition in 1621 collapsed entirely. Over 20,000 Ottoman soldiers died, not from Polish strength, but from sabotage, confusion, and betrayal, all because one princess turned her wedding night into a blackmail operation. And Jevahir Sultan's story didn't end there. She didn't stop with one husband. Kara Davud Pasha died mysteriously in 1622. Natural causes, though he was only 45 and in perfect health. Jevahir remarried twice more. Each husband rose to power. Each made political moves that mysteriously undermined the empire. The pattern was undeniable and terrifying. She used that same wedding night threat 3 times, with 3 different husbands, turning each into a puppet who moved only when she pulled the strings. Ottoman. Court records show Jevahir Sultan amassed a fortune, far beyond even her imperial allowance. Historians believe she sold political influence, took bribes from foreign powers, and essentially ran a shadow government from behind her gilded chambers. But power built on fear doesn't last forever. Eventually, the Sultan learned the truth. No one knows exactly how. Maybe one husband finally broke and confessed. Maybe Venetian spies sold her secret to Ottoman intelligence. Or maybe the pattern became too obvious. Every husband she married mysteriously sabotaging imperial campaigns. Every failure somehow benefiting her. What we do know is that in 1623, Jevahir Sultan vanished from all court records. No death announcement, no funeral, no memorial inscription, nothing. And that silence speaks volumes, because for an imperial princess, disappearance without ceremony was almost impossible. Even when Ottoman royals died naturally, their funerals were grand state events, processions of imams, banners, drums, and public mourning. But Jevahir received none of it. No grave has ever been found, no tomb inscription, no eulogy. Historians agree on one conclusion: she was quietly executed, likely strangled with a silken cord, the so-called merciful death reserved for royalty. Her murder erased to avoid the scandal of admitting that a princess, a daughter of the Sultan himself, had betrayed the empire. And here's the tragic twist: her execution might have saved lives. After Jevahir's disappearance, her brother Sultan Murad IV began reforming the marriage system. The infamous inspection ceremonies became less degrading. Automatic executions for minor disrespect nearly stopped. By the early 1700s, imperial princesses could choose celibacy instead of forced marriage. And by the 1800s, they could even refuse a marriage proposal outright, without punishment. It took one woman's monstrous manipulation of a monstrous system to finally force change. But that victory came far too late. By the time the reforms arrived, hundreds of men were dead, and hundreds of women had lived their entire lives as prisoners in golden cages. Their wedding nights weren't celebrations, they were trials of obedience. Their marriages weren't unions, they were instruments of political control. Over 3 centuries, more than 100 men were executed or disappeared after marrying Ottoman princesses. Countless royal women lived trapped in velvet prisons, their beauty, their bodies, and their status weaponized by law. This was the true face of the Ottoman imperial marriage system. Not romance, not grandeur, just fear disguised as tradition. Everyone inside it was either a victim, a monster, or both. And here's what makes this story truly haunting. We talk today about consent, forced marriage, and bodily autonomy, and we should, but the Ottoman princesses remind us of something darker. They had legal power. They could have their husbands executed on a whim. They had wealth, education, and untouchable status. And still, they were not free, because power without freedom is just a more elaborate cage. These women could destroy men's lives, but couldn't choose their own. They could order death, but not claim desire. They could command the empire's respect, but not its mercy. They had everything except the right to control their own bodies and futures. The system finally died with the Ottoman Empire itself in the early 1900s. The last imperial princesses lived to see their empire collapse, their titles reduced to dust, their palaces turned into museums. Some fled abroad, living quietly in exile. Others stayed in Istanbul, walking past tourists who marveled at the same marble halls that had once been their prisons. Their stories, the ones you've just heard, were buried in Ottoman Turkish archives, hidden in Venetian spy reports and French ambassador diaries, unread for centuries, until now. So here's my question for you. If you were an Ottoman princess in 1600, knowing everything you know now, what would you have chosen? Would you have submitted and survived? Would you have weaponized the system like Jevahir Sultan? Or would you have rebelled, knowing it might mean death? Comment below with your answer. And if you want to hear more about powerful women who fought impossible systems, watch my video on Jevahir Sultan, the woman who ruled the empire from behind the veil and flipped this entire system on its head. Subscribe for the history they never taught you. Because behind every crown lies a body count, and behind every Ottoman wedding night, a nightmare that makes horror stories look tame.